So Apple has pulled their products out of Russia. Disney has pulled their movies out of Russia. And I saw this in the world of video games, and I thought, look, you can disagree, as I do, with Russia invading Ukraine, and see that EA Sports is pulling Russian teams out of FIFA and say this doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense. And I even saw a sports media company that said, we're not even going to carry the scores of Russian games anymore. And I thought to myself, well, that seems like really strange, right? So this selective wokeness as it pertains to global issues really bothers me, okay? My position's pretty straightforward. Apple should make their phones, and yes, I have an iPhone. Apple should make their phones, in my opinion, in the United States. I wish they made them here instead of China. But if Apple elects to make their phones in China, to me, you can also understand their capitalistic argument for why they're doing it. Bigger issue, though, is how in the world is Apple standing up to Russia and not selling their phones there while simultaneously making their phones in a genocidal country like China? I don't think it's asking too much to say of a company, hey, if you are going to argue that you are concerned about social justice and human rights around the world, why are you selectively deciding to be outraged in Russia if you're Apple or Disney or the NBA for that matter or FIFA, and not being outraged in general? In other words, FIFA said to Russia, hey, we're not going to allow you to compete in the World Cup this year. Okay. Why did we do everyone not the same thing to the IOC as it pertains to China? Why did we all bend the knee to China? And the answer is because China is more powerful economically than Russia. I watched the State of the Union last night, and I asked this question on the Clay and Buck show. I saw a ton of different congressmen and congresswomen wearing a Ukraine lapel on their shirts and their jackets, whatever they're wearing at the State of the Union. And the question that I asked, and I think it's an interesting one, is how many of those same people, if China invaded Taiwan, would have a Taiwan flag on their lapel? I think it would be far fewer people. Is Apple going to refuse to sell their gear in China if Taiwan is invaded by China? Or is Disney going to refuse to allow their movies to be released in China? Or are we going to see an entirely different response in the event? We certainly haven't seen this happen with China taking over Hong Kong. We're seeing a completely different response based on what the power situation is and what the power dynamics are in that scenario. So I just want you to think a little bit about that. Finally, I don't think I talked about this yesterday, but this is absolutely absurd and ridiculous and somehow perfect simultaneously. Did you see that our federal government released new guidelines on what to do in the event of nuclear explosion? This is at ready.gov, okay? At ready.gov, they say that if a nuclear explosion happens, this is legitimately, I'm reading directly from the website. Many people may already feel fear and anxiety about COVID-19. The threat of a nuclear explosion can add additional stress. Nuclear explosion can add additional stress. This is from our government websites as it pertains to COVID intersecting with nuclear explosions. If there is a nuclear explosion, your government wants you to know, try to maintain a distance of at least 6 feet between yourself and the people who are not part of your household. Wear a mask as well if a nuclear explosion happens. Remember, The threat of a nuclear explosion can add additional stress to people who are already stressed about COVID. If you have to call 911, I really question whether 911 is going to work very well in the event of nuclear explosion. But if you have to call 911, your government wants you to know that you need to put on a mask before help arrives. This is real. This is your government reacting to nuclear explosion. Again, the threat of a nuclear explosion can add additional stress to people already stressed by COVID-19. We got to end the insanity. We got to end all restrictions. We got to go back to 100% normalcy. Should have been there a long time ago. Have to be there right now.